day, everyone. Welcome to Vietnam Holdings webinar, Vietnam's retail market. At this time, all participants are in listen-only mode. Later, we will conduct a question and answer session through the phone lines, and instructions will follow at that time. Alternatively, participants can submit written questions using the Ask a Question button on the webcast page. I would like to remind everyone that this call is being recorded. I will now hand over to Craig Martin, Executive Chairman of Dynam Capital, the fund manager of Vietnam Holding, to open the presentation. Craig, please go ahead.
Thank you. Well, a very good morning to you in Europe and a good afternoon to you in Asia. I'm Craig Martin, and I'm Chairman of Dynam Capital, the fund manager for Vietnam Holding. I'm very pleased today to give you a presentation on the exciting opportunities we see in Vietnam and in the retail market. Next slide. Thank you. So yesterday, Vietnam Holding, which is the fund that Dynam Capital manages, released its interim results as of 31st December 22. What we'll be presenting to you today is even fresher. It's more updated. As of the data today will be as of 28th of February. And Dynam is a partner-owned firm. We're managing an active, concentrated portfolio of Vietnamese equities. The fund is listed on the main board of the London Stock Exchange. And we've demonstrated outperformance against the indices over 1, 3, 5, and 10 years. We're a nimble investment fund, easy to buy on the London Stock Exchange, and very much focused on a strong, high conviction portfolio with integrated ESG. Our portfolio footprint, our carbon footprint is much lower than the index. And for more than a decade, we've been a signatory to the United Nations Principles for Responsible Investing and scored top marks in their recent transparency report. Our portfolio is constructed based on the attractive opportunities we see out of the Vietnam story, and we'll be talking about that today. In previous webinars, we've spoken about digitalization, and we've been joined in the past by FPT. We've also spoken about logistics, and we've been joined by Jewellery. And we're truly excited and honored today to have three members of the PNJ team. PNJ is a leading jewelry company, one of our core holdings in Vietnam. And we'll be introducing them a bit later in the call. And there'll be plenty of time for Q&A. So please do think of questions that you'd like to ask to the PNJ team. It's a real honor and a privilege to have them with us today. Next slide. So we'll talk a little bit about the Vietnam story. But then we'll focus very much on the retail opportunities and the inflection point we see. My colleague Tan will talk us through the Vietnam Holding portfolio, how we're positioned for the opportunities. And then, as I mentioned, PNJ, our guest today, will be talking about their business, which for us is a tremendous investment. And then in the Q&A, myself, Tan, the PNJ team, and also Tin, the CIO of Dynam Capital, will be ready to answer as many of your questions as we can. Next slide. So for many, this is a familiar slide. Vietnam, a large population, which we'll be touching on. And in the past, we've really focused, I think, on the foreign direct investment story, how Vietnam has garnered so much foreign direct investment as part of this China Plus One strategy, and how that has driven its manufacturing for export, the Made in Vietnam story, and how that has driven GDP and its growth. Well, today we'll be focusing on perhaps just two of the key points on this slide. One is the urbanization rate, and one is the per capita GDP. So we'll be talking a little bit more about those than we have in previous webinars. Next slide. But we can't walk away from the fact that Vietnam is a fast-growing economy. For 30 years now, its GDP growth has averaged 6.5%, based on that high level of foreign direct investment and that Made in Vietnam story. But the conditions are now in place for a thriving domestic economy. And that continues to provide resilience to the Vietnam opportunity. As we'll see, rapid levels of urbanization, industrialization are expected to accelerate the modernization of the economy and provide even more investment opportunities. And although the Vietnamese economy is meant to be, or targeted to be, about $500 billion in just a couple of years' time, by 2050, it could be in the top 20 economies in the world. Next slide. And we'll be pointing also to the growth in the retail sales market in Vietnam, $240 billion in market size. It's a very thriving market. It recovered very rapidly from COVID. And last year, retail sales were up about 20% year on year. And even this year, in a difficult global market, we're looking at consumption to be growing in the high single digits. A modern trade in Vietnam is booming, and domestic brands in Vietnam are thriving. Next slide. Tourism, many of you may have visited Vietnam. If not, please come. It's a wonderful country, rich culture and heritage, great food, great people, lots to see. But obviously during the COVID period, tourism basically evaporated. The first to come back was the domestic tourism at levels not seen before, at levels of activity higher than pre-pandemic. The international tourism has been somewhat slow to come back, although it has been starting. And just this month, welcoming the first friends from China, the first tourists from China. And so we're anticipating that next year, a combination of the strong domestic tourism and the very strong international tourism will also be a key driving force for the economy. And the government's looking at relaxing some of the visa regimes to either give visa exemptions or extended stays. And we think that will also help provide a boom to the tourist industry in Vietnam. Next slide. So now let's focus a little bit on how we see and what we see in the retail market and why we're excited by the opportunities. Next slide. So the first point we want to draw out is about the urbanization rate. Vietnam's urbanization rate is around about 37, 38%. That's where Western Europe was at the end of the Second World War. China, which we've illustrated in the gray line on this chart, reached that level of 37, 38% at the millennium, the turn of the century in 2000. Then China almost doubled its urbanization rate in just about 20 years. Václav Smil says, yeah, China added twice the total number of houses in the UK and in Spain in the first decade of this millennium. Also adding perhaps the total number of houses in Japan in that short period of time. So we see it as an inflection point. If you have growing cities, you have growing productivity, growing average incomes, you're bringing people and firms into close contact. So the cities make both more productive. So we see that the rapid urbanization, and Vietnam's urbanization rate is growing at one of the fastest rates in the world, will push the rise of modern retail trends. So convenience stores, modern branded outlets. And so we see this as an exciting inflection point. Next slide. The second key point is about the per capita GDP. That's also at an inflection point. So Vietnam's per capita GDP is about $4,000. That's 4 times where it was when the stock market opened about 20 years ago. And the GDP per capita has trebled since Vietnam joined the World Trade Organization in 2007. We think it's an inflection point because when Thailand got to this level, it doubled its GDP per capita in 7 years. When China got there, it doubled in 5 years. So we see this as an important stage for seeing growth in the middle class and increasingly consumer-driven society. PNJ will perhaps allude to later for their business. And And Vietnam's consumer power could double by 2035 with increased demand for goods. So even in the last 5 years, we've seen the number of billionaires go up by 4 times, the number of ultra high net worth individuals go up significantly more than that. So there is increasing affluence, and this is all part of this inflection point that we illustrated, both in terms of the per capita GDP, but also we think accelerated by the urbanization trend. Next slide. And as that modern trade increases as a percentage of the overall retail market, an element to that is e-commerce. And that accelerated during COVID, as it did in many countries around the world. So we see a real boost to e-commerce and a real boost to modern trade as a whole. Next slide. And this is a path we've seen in the rest of Asia. Developed Asian markets, so Singapore, Malaysia, and Thailand have seen modern grocery be the key dominant factor in retail. We've seen that penetration there. This chart shows on a log base of GDP per capita, how the modern trade penetration of grocery, as an example, increases. So Vietnam's got a long way to go, but again, it's on that inflection point. And so we see tremendous growth, and this will be accelerated by the enablement that e-commerce provides. Next slide. 30 years ago, a brand in Vietnam, if it was good, wasn't made in Vietnam. It was a foreign brand. And then about 20 years ago, a foreign brand made in Vietnam was seen as a good brand. But now, in the last 10 years, domestic brand champions have risen up in Vietnam. Vietnamese brands for the Vietnamese market. And we're very proud to have PNJ as one great example of that as our guest today. But there are many others in many other different categories. So local brands are gaining more trust with the consumer. That's a seismic shift in consumer behavior. Next slide. Just to touch a little bit on that digital economy, because it's booming in Vietnam. Vietnam's got one of the highest growth rates in e-commerce in Asia, more than 30% per annum. The overall digital economy is forecast to be about $160 billion by 2030, of which e-commerce will be about $30 to $35 billion, even shorter by 2025. And making this all possible is digital payments, so wallets and e-payment mechanisms, and that market is also soaring rapidly. So a fast track towards a digital economy. Next slide. So I'll hand over now to my colleague Tan, who will see how and explain how our portfolio fits into what's happening in the equity market within Vietnam. Thank you, Tan.
Thank you, Craig. Yes, it's very happy to share with you the opportunities in the equity market and how Vietnam Holding is positioned to catch the long-term opportunities, especially for the consumption themes, and also how we can mitigate the short-term challenges of the economy. Yes, so next slide. So 2022 is a very difficult year for equity investors in Vietnam. Many retail investors after the COVID, and a lot of people joined the equity market. And then because of the liquidity crunch, so they have to sell off the position, the holdings in the equity market to improve the liquidity. And it's negatively impact the equity market. But despite the short-term difficulties, we still believe that it is just short-term. It is because of the liquidity crunch where in the market driven by 95% of retail investors. And we still believe that at the moment is a very good time for investors to take a long-term view to buy these companies at a very attractive valuations. For Vietnam Holding, the portfolios is well constructed, and this is now trading as a very attractive valuation, just about 8 times of forward PE, with the EPS growth forecast to be around 25% compared to about 10% of the market. Next slide. When we compare Vietnam to other emerging markets, it is very clear that it has not fully reflected the strong economic fundamentals of the country. And the key reason for that, despite, aside from other factors like the political, the war between Russia and in Ukraine, or the banking crisis in Europe and or in the US market, I think that domestically, the critical point here is in the liquidity issue in Vietnam. However, the SBV, the Central Bank of Vietnam, has been well managed the situation, and this is helped by much healthier banking sectors in Vietnam compared to 10 years ago. And we already see the signals of the turnaround of the monetary policy in Vietnam. We already see their interest rates cool off in the market for the last 2 months. And also the liquidity in the system already improved a lot. And we think that after the liquidity crunch, the crisis, given the resilience of the economy and the healthier banking system, the problem will be solved quite quickly compared to other economy. Yeah, next slide. Yeah, let's talk a little bit about our approach. Investment approach has been very consistent during the good time and also the bad time. And our investment philosophy is basically based on the fundamental approach that combine both the top-down and bottom-up analysis. And this is start from the identification of companies that can offer the long-term and sustainable growth. We believe that ESG is also a very critical factors in the whole investment process, aside from the financial criteria. And it's proved that with that approach over the last more than 10 years of the fund, it can generate and sustain the long-term returns for the fund. Finally, a very critical reason for very critical factors for our approach is the disciplined portfolio construction process. It involves in the process of diversifying the portfolios across the sectors, across the companies, to deliver the long-term returns, and also to control, to manage the risk in the short term and also in the long term. Yeah, next slide. This is a snapshot of our portfolios and how we construct and position ourselves to catch the opportunities for the long term. And the portfolio is still focused on 3 key investment themes. The domestic consumption, yes, is for the long term. The urbanization and industrializations. For the last 2 years, we actually increased our investment in banks with about 30% weight. The bank in Vietnam is quite different compared to other markets. And because it is one of the key beneficiaries of the long-term macroeconomic outlook of Vietnam, and also the key beneficiary of the consumption trend in Vietnam, which is about 25% of the focus of the bank is in the retail market. Yeah, next slide. Yeah, given that we are committed to providing our clients with sustainable long-term growth and sustainable alpha in investment, and fortunately we can outperform the market sustainably for the last decade. Yeah, now I would like to hand over the presentation to Craig for further information about the fund and about the product, and then the presentation by one of our jewel in the portfolio.
Thanks, Dan. As Dan said, it's a market which has great opportunity, but we think you have to take a midterm view. 3 to 5 years is what we encourage people to look at, because it's not an entirely smooth journey, as that chart shows. There is volatility. In January, the market was up 10%, February it was down 10%. But if we believe that we can find good companies and positioned well, not doing anything particularly clever, just doing things well and consistently and being nimble, that bears great fruit for our investors. Next slide. So it's easy to buy the fund on the London Stock Exchange. We have a very active independent board of the fund who manage the discount to the NAV through share buybacks, through investor communication that we coordinate, and also every now and again through tender offers. And then every 5 years through offering a continuation vote to investors. There's one at the back end of this year, and we encourage our investors to participate in that and vote as they see fit. And we hope that you continue to support what we're doing for you as an investor through Vietnam Holding. Next slide. So with great pleasure, would like to hand over the floor to PNJ. I say we have 3 people from PNJ today. I think Ms. Nguyen is going to lead us through the presentation, and then Ms. Tao will be there for the Q&A as well. Great opportunity to hear it from the horse's mouth about the opportunities in Vietnam. So I'll hand over now to PNJ. Thank you very much.
So thank you, Dan and team, for your insightful and informative presentation. So now it is our pleasure to begin with our presentation on behalf of PNJ. So my presentation has 2 main parts, including the overview of our company and the outlook for the future. So first, I would like to give you a brief overview of our company with 5 key investment highlights. The first key investment highlight is that we hold a leading position in Vietnam's jewelry market. And at this point, I will show you an overview of the Vietnam's jewelry market and how we run our business to take the current leading position. First, from a macro perspective, there are 3 main points clarifying the room for growth of Vietnam's jewelry market. First, we have a very favorable demographic with a large population of more than 98 million people, and this is one of the key growth drivers of the consumer and jewelry retail market. Secondly, jewelry is a discretionary product, and we position our products in the mid and high-end segments. So our key growth drivers are an increase in the personal disposable income and the rising in the middle and affluent class size. And the potential of the Vietnam's jewelry market can also be shown by the consumer trend that Vietnam is the Asia's fastest growing country in the jewelry consumption. And the consumer trend is shifting from the high saving value products to the fashion jewelry. And you can see that the gold bar consumption shows their trend, while the gold jewelry consumption tends to go up. And last but not least, there is a steady rise in the jewelry consumption by dollars with a CAGR of more than 6%. And regarding the Vietnam's jewelry market, it is highly fragmented with less than 10 key players in the branded segments, and they have a brand recognition and only 30% market shares, while more than 10,000 mom and pop shops make up with the remaining 70%. And our company, PNJ, dominates the branded market with 57% of the market shares. And I will show you our integrated business model and how we achieve the leading position in the following slides. First, we own a broad product portfolio in the retail channel, catering to the needs of customers across all age groups. And as you can see that we have a diversified brand portfolio with PNJ Silver, styled by PNJ, PNJ Gold, and Graphite Jewelry, serving the customer from the mid to the high segments. And we distribute our products through our extensive retail network with more than 350 stores across 55 over 63 provinces. And our strategy is to open more stores in 2023 to increase our market shares. And the other distribution channel is the wholesale, in which we design our own products and sell them to the mom and pop shop under PNJ brands, and it helps us to utilize our resources and penetrate the mass market to attract more customers. And to support our sales business and production, we have the PNJ Lab inspecting the bracelet, stones, and jewelry products. Until now, PNJ Lab remains one of the very few local companies operating in this field. And in terms of production, the production is a part of our integrated business model that helps us to capture the margin along the value chain and achieve economy of scale. So in terms of manufacturing, we have our own factory with a total capacity of 4 million products per year located in Gò Vấp district. And we are expanding the second factory in Long Hậu to support our long-run development. And the second key investment highlight is the digital transformation. It serves as the essential motivation for our growth. So the digital transformation projects help us to enhance the data mining and analysis capabilities to increase the customer experiences through creating the customized and highly effective sales program. And I believe that its impacts are clearly demonstrated by our business results in the 2022. And I will show you it in the third key investment highlights that we possess a strong financial profile. So in the past 5 years, we recorded a steady growth in both the top line and the bottom line. In 2022, we recorded a net revenue of nearly 34 trillion dong and a net profit of more than 1.8 trillion dong. This is equivalent to the growth of more than 70% in terms of net revenue and net profit. And regarding the market, we maintain a stable dividend payment policy in process through the years, and our stock performance has also outperformed the market. The fourth key investment highlight is one of our valuable assets, as we have a transparent corporate governance and structure under the expert guidance of distinguished leaders. In detail, we have 4 points as follows. The first point is the diversity in the board composition and transparency in the corporate governance. So PNJ BOD member comprise 9 members with gender diversity, as we have 4 males and 5 females, and our chairperson is a woman. Besides, we have 3 independent and 3 non-executive members to ensure the independence of our operations. The second point is a diverse mix of expertise, backgrounds, and competencies. Their qualifications include specialized knowledge of the company's industry and experience in certain functions of the company, such as the strategy, risk management, finance, human resources, or legal. And there are a group of visionary business leaders recognized by the business community. And last but not least, our BOD successfully built a succession plan. And the last key investment highlight is about the ESG activities. So PNJ is the first listed company in Vietnam to establish the ESG subcommittee under the control of the BOD in April 2022. So what our desire for sustainable development? We've been building a solid foundation of sustainable development at our company since many years ago under many ESG activities. And that makes us be recognized as the top 10 sustainable business in Vietnam for 7 years in a row and top 5 best corporate governance among the large cap companies. And we are also a constituent of the Vietnam Sustainability Index. And I would like to go through to the outlook of our company in the future. So we have 3 pillar roles. As retail is our core business, so the first pillar of growth is the retail expansion. We plan to open about 35 to 40 new stores per year, and we will cooperate with the well-known international brands to develop our portfolios. And the second pillar is the production technology and the human resources. We increase our production capacity through upgrading the machines and expanding the second factory in Long Hậu. And the third factory is in the pipeline. And in terms of human resources, we have many programs to enhance our employees' professional skills and improve the management abilities. Last but not least, we continue to strengthen our digital transformation system to maximize the effectiveness and efficiency of the operation and enrich the customer experiences. So this is the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Nguyen, and on behalf of all of Dynam. And that's a tremendous presentation. We'll be moving now to a time for question and answers. Initially, the first questions I think will be those for PNJ while it's fresh perhaps in people's minds. And what a great opportunity and a great company that's been described by the PNJ team. So we'll move to Q&A. From Dynam, Tan and myself will talk on Vietnam holding questions, but around PNJ, we're delighted to have Ms. Tao with a beautiful backdrop there and a bigger diamond probably than I can afford or want to afford to answer your questions. So perhaps can we have the first questions, please?
Thank you. We will now begin questions from the phone lines. As a reminder, participants can submit written questions using the Ask a Question button on the webcast page. To ask a question on the phone lines, please press *1 on your telephone keypad. We will pause for a moment to assemble the queue. We don't have any questions on the phone lines, so we will now address the questions submitted via the webcast page. And our first question is for PNJ. PNJ has gained more market shares in the last few years. What could be the main reasons making PNJ better than its competitors in the market?
So Ms. Tao, how have you been so successful and how are you going to compete going forward?
First of all, I'd like to express my gratitude for being invited by Dynam to join such an interesting webinar where you share about the outlook on the Vietnamese market, which makes me proud as well as a proud Vietnamese. So first, before I answer the question, I'd like to just briefly introduce myself. So my name is Thao Tran, and I'm a non-executive board member. So I look after the investor relation functions of the board and also ESG committee. So Ms. Nguyen, who just did the corporate presentation, is the IR executive. So initially, our team was meant to have 3 people joining today, but at the last minute, Ms. Mai couldn't take it. So I'll be, the main person who responds to most of your questions. So I think, like the answers to the question actually already been incorporated in the presentation by Ms. Nguyen, but I just highlighted that we have always been, stay hungry and stay foolish. So we established in 1988, starting as a state-owned company, and has been through all of the transformation wave of the Vietnamese economy. and we successfully became privatized, listed on the stock market. And our philosophy is always to transform while we are on the top. So even though we have always been the clear leader in the fashion jewelry segment for the branded sector, we always look forward to innovative marketing or innovative retail technique in order to grab more market share from our competitors. So currently we are the largest national chain, and we have over 360 stores, which is by a large margin compared to our next player on the national scale. The second player would probably have 150 stores. But also we consider our competition is in a bigger dimension. So we're actually competing within the luxury discretionary purchase segment. So we no longer view ourselves as just a jeweler, but we internally we talk about us as a modern retailer looking to build up a lifestyle retail segment. So I think the strongest driver for us has always been our people. And as Ms. Nguyen mentioned, one of the key factors was we're very proud to be among sort of the first generation of Vietnamese business that have successfully transitioned to the second generation of younger, more dynamic management. So our CEO, Mr. Tri Thong Le, he just completed the first term as the CEO for 5 years, and he's done it so well. And if you follow the Vietnam market, then you would see for a CEO coming in and completed a full term, it's an achievement in itself, because for some other companies they might put in a CEO, but then it might not work. The dynamic between the first generation founders and the new team. So we're very glad that we've gone through that sort of turning point. And then in the past 3-4 years, we've launched what we call the F5 refresh, internal transformation, business transformation. So we're now the CEO, when he came in, he planned for it. He officially launched it in 2019. So we now, in our fourth years on the journey, and the team this year is to, lift the game. So in about a week time, in probably 2 weeks, we will launch our annual report, and you will see us seeing ourselves as an aircraft, going beyond sort of the current level. So just lift the game.
Lift the game.
Yeah.
Very good. Thank you. Next question.
The next question is also for PNG, and it is coming from David Johnson from Martin and Company. The question is, how do you ensure ethical extraction sourcing of the metals and gems?
So
Ms. Tao, so the question is about ethical sourcing of your input materials, of your gems and jewelry.
So we're aware of that, one of the key commitments for a company to practice good ESG standard, and we're currently, building our internal standard. So in the past, we have sourced our gemstone from small sellers, but now we've moved on to start, dealing for larger contracts with, more branded players. So that's something that we look to improve further in the future.
Okay, great. Next question.
Okay, thank you. The next question is for Dynam, and the question is, what is the panel's view on the timeline for Vietnam to be recognized as an emerging market country for investment? And has the recent market turmoil and government interventions pushed back the timeline?
Thank you. We'll come to that if I may. I've just seen there's another question in the chat here, which is someone asking, can I ask a question about Vietnamese culture? This is for PNJ, so this is for Ms. Tao. It says, in the UK, someone proposes their partner with a ring, often a diamond ring, and then they have to buy wedding rings, often gold. Is that the same practice and culture in Vietnam? And is that a big part of your business, Ms. Tao?
So Vietnamese traditional motive for jewelry buying, tends to be around wedding with for dowry purpose mainly. So, like the groom's family will have to bring the dowry offer to the bride's family, and also the family will sort of put in as gifts. So, for instance, the mother, father, and also the uncles, the aunts. So they will give there's a gifting session right at the traditional Vietnamese wedding. And now in rural area of Vietnam, that's still a strong motive. So you probably will be amazed of how much gold. But I think in a way it's similar to the Indian wedding scene, but that's been the traditional motive. So with the changing in the demography, then nowadays more Western sort of concepts were imported into Vietnam, and PNJ is actually very proud that we are among the always on the pioneer front to bring in those sort of modern retail concept, because in a sense sometimes occasions like Valentine is made by certain retailers to stir up the purchase motivation as well. So looking back in our history, PNJ was very proud that we actually brought Valentine into Vietnam. So that was about in the 90s. So prior to that year, people in Vietnam was very unfamiliar with Valentine as a special occasion of the year. And then PNJ, in the 1990s, launched a very successful marketing campaign that actually had people queue up in front of our store to buy, the Valentine special edition of jewelry. So we always try to do that. So Valentine was the first innovation, and then fast to the year 2023. For this year Valentine, our campaign was proposed. So our key MV for this year is the remake of the song "I Do" by the British voice band 911. So "I Do" is a song about proposal. But the ingenuity of our MV is that we say proposal is not just for people who have not married. So it's never too late to propose. So even to your existing wife, because we found out that only 10% or even less, of Vietnamese wives were ever been proposed by her husband. So we turned this into sort of a campaign for more Vietnamese women to be proposed. So basically, we already top of mind when people think about wedding band. So now we want to be top of mind for the proposal ring as well. But these two, which is actually only one of the categories, people also buy our jewelry for other motivation as well. And the sort of self-care category, the young female buy jewelry just to reward herself and she feels good, is also one of our key marketing pillars.
Fantastic. So you're saying 90% of Vietnamese women have not been proposed to. So hopefully that's great demand for diamond rings, if nothing else. That's tremendous.
At least it stirs the conversation.
It certainly does. It's getting a lot of Vietnamese men worried. Yeah, that's right.
And in terms of the contribution to society, PNJ is very proud that we bring in up like beautiful values in life, because we have customers who are in their 70s who go into our jewelry store to buy a gift for his spouse, something that he's never done in his life, and that's a very treasure moment.
It's a scary moment. I know, that's tremendous. And I thank you for explaining how there's some similarities with other Asian countries in Southeast Asia and China, where the mother-in-law provides the dowry, but perhaps in addition to that, the men or the other partners are going to have to get their money out and come into your stores. Well, that's tremendous. Well, let's take a couple of questions that I think were targeted towards Dynam about Vietnam holding. And if we have time, we'll come back on some more to you, Ms. Tao, around that. So a question that I think the moderator just mentioned about emerging market, frontier market. We haven't really spoken a lot today about that. Vietnam is the largest frontier market at 30% of the frontier index. It's not part of the emerging market index proper. That's a process that takes a long time. In reality, it's probably 2 years away. Every June, MSCI normally announces which countries are being considered to have their stocks included in the emerging market index. So the earliest that would be June of this year, but that's just around the corner. I suspect the earliest would be next year, June. So that means probably we're looking at June. Then there's a year prior to it being announced that it will definitely be included, and then a year later it's included. So probably June 26th will be when the earliest Vietnam will be included properly in the emerging market index. But the government and the ministries are keen for that. They've just got to convince MSCI and the people that decide these things that it's worthy of that inclusion, which it will be at some stage. Next question, please, for Dainan.
Next question is, if we and the VHN team see a slowdown in global growth, will the rise in domestic growth and consumption be enough to offset Vietnam's exposure to global trade?
Well, great question. Probably not. Tan, what will be the impact of the global slowdown on exports, and how much can the domestic economy provide some resilience to that?
Yes, the export this export sector is very important for Vietnam. But luckily, this is quite interesting for Vietnam. During the COVID, Vietnam can take the market share from China to export to the US and also to EU market. So the export growth of Vietnam is still very strong during the COVID. And this year, we expect that the reopening of China would be the cushion for the slowdown of the economy in the US and in the EU market. However, the slowdown in China and for the rest of the world is very clear. And then I would think that while we're not expecting the export to be around like 20% like last year, but single-digit growth would be achievable for Vietnam. Diversify and the cushion and the support from China. For the consumption market, as you can see from the presentation that Craig already mentioned, is quite sizable, about $240 billion compared to around $450 billion of GDP. So it's a very big consumption market. And for the last 2 months already rose at about more than 10%. Yeah. So we think that Vietnam is well positioned for to mitigate the negative impact of the slowdown of the global economy.
Great. Building on from that question, I'll perhaps ask Ms. Tao. So, the world's a volatile place, and globally, in other countries, there's economic slowdown and cost of living crisis in Europe and in the US. In Vietnam, how are you seeing?
So for this year, we start to see, the negative impact, and I think we have held our position pretty well throughout, 2022, because for, some other large retailers, they were already hit, even in the Q3 or Q4 of 2022. For us, at least for the first 2 months of the year, we are flat compared to last year, which was a phenomenally good year for us. But I think, of course, people tend to have the conception that because jewelry is luxury discretionary spending, so people would cut down on those expenses. That's true, but on the other hand, there's still the main sort of occasions like for gifting. So what we see is that people don't sort of reduce the frequency of purchase, and we also try to gain more market share by increasing the number of new customers for us. But the ticket size does get impacted. But I think for our sector is helped by the fact that jewelry is also a store of value to a certain extent. So if people consider between jewelry purchase versus sort of perfume purchase, that's not a good store of value at all, that's more consumables, then will be favored. But also, we have moved to a position where sort of jewelry is also a reward to oneself. So even though in tough time, those sort of self-rewarding purchasing motive will probably still be there. So people will still need something to liven them up.
That's a great point. I think in some countries it's referred to as the lipstick effect. That in tough times, people still want to buy things that bring them cheer. And in Vietnam last week, one of my colleagues in your store was buying lots of jewelry. So maybe she was trying to cheer herself up. So that's tremendous around that. Also in Vietnam, we see lots of people getting married or taking wedding photos. So I think that bodes well for the year, perhaps weddings and celebrations that were put off during COVID. Thank you, Ms. Tao. We have a couple of questions here, which perhaps we'll mold together. They're around stock market volatilities and sectors moving in and out of favor. And someone said, well, we've described ourselves as nimble as a manager. Well, what does that mean? So the question, I think, for Tan, portfolio changes perhaps over the last 12, 18 months, big picture, portfolio turnover. What are we liking and what are we a little bit more cautious on?
Yes, so we have been doing a lot of rebalancing activities for our portfolio since the second half of last year. So given the fact that the slowdown, the crisis of the corporate bond market, the tightening monetary policy, so at that time we already reduced our exposure to the very vulnerable sectors, is the real estate. So at the moment, the real estate exposure to our portfolio is just about 2 to 3%. And for the banking sectors, even though we are very confident in the banking sectors, given the income structure of the bank, which is much more healthier more than 10 years ago. However, we also, for the risk management, we cut our exposure to the bank, and we are focusing more on the domestic consumption. And PNJ is one of the example for the long term and for the conviction of the portfolios in the domestic consumption. At the moment, PNJ account for about 10% of the NAV of the portfolio. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Tan, on that, there's another question about banks. Someone said, I see you have 30% of your portfolio in banks. Isn't that a lot? And is that risky considering the mess that the banks in the US and Switzerland, e.g. Credit Suisse? So just perhaps a minute on why you think Vietnamese banks are not in the same situation as some of the large US and European banks.
Yes, I think that Vietnam's the capital market of Vietnam is not that developed. So of course, it's very different compared to the US market. And Vietnam still have to rely a lot in the banking system for its growth. And the key difference of the commercial banking in Vietnam is the compared to itself 10 years ago, and also compared to our other developed markets, the income structure of the commercial banking in Vietnam. This has been improved a lot. About 20% of the income is from non-interest income. And the retail exposure, the retail segment in the loan book of the banks has been expanding and now account for about 20 to 25% of the whole loan book. And this exposure is quite resilient. And for the non-interest income, we have seen the bigger contribution from the fee, from the bank cash run activities, and from other not risky activities, and also the lower contribution from the state-owned commercial, state-owned enterprises after about 10 years of reform. And the better regulation in the banking sectors. So, and also a very low exposure of the banking sectors in Vietnam to the bond market. It is about 4%. So it's very different. And for 30%, it is too much. We think that is acceptable at the moment. The banking stock price already we had a correction in the banking sectors like a year ago. So, and now the banking sectors is now trading is just some banks is below 1 value, and with the expected ROE is still about 15 to 20%, even though in a very difficult year of 2023. So the
question is about PNG, but I'll answer it if I may. isn't PNJ at the foreign ownership limit? The answer is yes. A number of stocks in our portfolio are at their foreign ownership limit. We mark them at the market price, but if we were to sell them, we could sell them at a premium. We don't want to sell. We think it's a great company. And that's a nice way perhaps to round up around Vietnam Holding, is that we have a portfolio of liquid Vietnamese companies that we mark at the stock price that they trade at, although there's an implicit premium if we were to sell. And for investors in the fund, in Vietnam Holding, the fund trades at a discount to its net asset value, around about 14%, sometimes as high as 15%. So there's a great opportunity there for investors to buy Vietnam Holding through the London Stock Exchange, take advantage of the discount, and yet get exposure to great companies like PNJ and the great longer-term trend of a growing retail consumer market in Vietnam. So with that, I'd like to thank you, everyone, for attending the webinar. I certainly want to really thank PNJ, Ms. Tao, Ms. Nguyen, and her team for putting together the presentation for this webinar. And these materials will be recorded for a number of people I know that can't join today. They will be able to watch the video. And to thank my colleague Tan and Tin for presenting and their work today. So thank you for your support in Vietnam Holding and in what we're trying to do, and bringing Vietnam to you as tremendous opportunity. We see it as growth, 20% EPS growth at a very reasonable price, 7-8 times PE. So what's not to like? Thank you very much, and I wish you a very safe day. Thank you.